10L Sports Central will be going over our next scheduled preview this offseason, and it will be over the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And this was a team that went 3-9 in the 2018 season, and overall a bit of an underwhelming season for Georgia Tech. But how will they do in 2020 is what we're going over here today. We're going to be going over a few players that this team will be losing, who they're returning, and also going over their schedule for the first time this offseason. Starting off with the games that this team has had since November. We start off on November 2nd, where they played Pittsburgh. Of course, Pittsburgh last season. They weren't all that terrible, but they lost that one 10-20. They also lost to Virginia on the road, 20-33. The following week, they played Virginia Tech at home, and that was a shutout, 0-45. They were able to get a decent win over NC State, though, on the 21st, 28-26, and that was before getting blown out to Georgia to finish off the season 7-52. And overall this November, I wouldn't say it was as bad as NC State's. Of course, NC State, as you know, is widely considered as the second worst ACC team last season. And of course, Georgia Tech being able to beat NC State on the 21st, I mean, you could argue that NC State really is the worst ACC team. And as far as records go, Georgia Tech actually had the worst record in the ACC last season. But overall, certainly, I mean, they were able to keep up with Pittsburgh and Virginia. I mean, two pretty decent teams, especially Virginia. I mean, they made it to the ACC championship game last season. So, nonetheless, between September and October, they were 2-5, and then between November and the rest of the season, they were 1-4. So, they didn't really improve a whole lot over the last season, but once again, they were a very, very young team last season, and that's a big reason for why it was a bit of a tougher season for this team. But moving on to your returning production for Georgia Tech, they returned their starting quarterback in James Graham. They basically returned their entire offense except for one offensive lineman. James Graham had just right over 1,100 yards of offense last season with 12 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. So, certainly, if he could lower his interception rate next season, that would be a huge help to this offense, especially since he's got a 2-1. They returned their top running back in Jordan Mason, which he was a big player for this team, probably the biggest or the best player on this offense last season, as he had just right around 1,000 yards with 7 touchdowns. They also returned their second quarterback and running back, Tobias Oliver. Of course, I have him marked down as a quarterback and a running back because he actually has more rushing and receiving yards than he does passing. He had right around 400 yards of rushing and receiving last season with 3 touchdowns. Meanwhile, he had 177 yards of passing with 2 interceptions. So, you could go either way on him. But they returned their top wide receiver in Amarian Brown, which he was a big player for this team too. He had just right around 400 yards with 7 touchdowns. They returned their second wide receiver in Adonicus Sanders, and he had just right around 250 yards. And then Malachi Carter, their third wide receiver, also returning to this team, as he had just right around 250 yards too. So, they also returned, I think they returned their entire wide receiver core other than them, so that's going to be big as well. And once again, they only lose one offensive lineman on this entire team, or on this entire offense. That's the only thing that they lose. So this offense definitely is going to improve, I think, a ton going into next season. I mean, when you're returning basically an entire side of the football, it's going to be huge, especially for Georgia Tech being a team that struggled last season. On the defense, they lose 3. They lose 1 defensive lineman, 1 linebacker, and 1 in the secondary. So on both sides of the football, this team I expect to improve a ton, but it's just the talent factor is the thing I'm a bit concerned about. But there's only 4 main losses on this entire team. That's just huge for any team. I mean, typically you'll see 3 to 4 losses on both sides of the football. Now onto your schedule for the next season. You start off the season on September 3rd when you play Clemson. That's going to be a tough way to start the season, but you got an easier opponent the next week against Gardner-Webb. You got them at home. You also have UCF at home on the 18th. Then you got North Carolina on the road to finish off September. In October, you got Virginia Tech and Virginia. And then you got Pittsburgh and Syracuse to finish it off. And then in November, you got Duke, Notre Dame, Miami, and Georgia. So this schedule is actually really tough. They definitely have a really tough schedule considering how not very good they were last season. But they got to play Georgia, Notre Dame, you got to play Clemson in here too, and then UCF. So certainly this Georgia Tech schedule is going to be really tough next season. And honestly, if they had an easier schedule, I think that they'd have a really good chance of making a bowl game next season, especially with all the returning production that they have once again that you just saw. But here's what I'm expecting. I'll give you 1 guaranteed win. I consider putting Duke on this list, possibly even UCF, but I'm just not going to do that quite yet. I think they'll be Gardner-Webb, though. That's definitely a guaranteed win in my opinion. But your record estimation is going to be 4-8 to 6-6. I think, once again, it's just too tough of a schedule for them next season in order to make a bowl game. If you got to make a bowl game, you got to beat Virginia Tech or Virginia, and you also have to deal with Notre Dame, Georgia, and Clemson, which all 3 of those teams were really good last season. And it's going to be really tough to be able to get up to that 6-win marker. But I'm not saying it's impossible, but I definitely think it's going to be a low chance of that happening. But yeah, and all that said, about wraps up our schedule preview on Georgia Tech. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team. Let me know whether you disagree with anything. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, thanks all for watching once again. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. So if you enjoyed the schedule preview too, be sure to slap a like on it and subscribe. Really helps out the channel, so I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching once again. Stay tuned for more. I will see you all later.